This can be fixed. But it can't be fixed if there are corrupt governments. It can't be fixed if there's not an awareness that this is an essential precondition to the mindset that will be receptive to these ideas of freedom. And I sometimes worry that the judiciaries, which are necessarily somewhat reactive rather than proactive, are relegated to sitting on the sidelines. And the question is, what can we do? The first thing we can do is to teach. The law is a teacher. You know, a belief in freedom isn't established by some DNA test. You don't have a test to see if you believe in freedom. Freedom is taught. And as judges, perhaps we can be teachers. And that may be one of our more important roles in this. And just before leaving, let me say that this interdependence is characterized by a universality, a commonality of expectations. And expectations for things like clean water, the basic means of subsistence, will soon turn into demands. And those demands are just. I sometimes wonder, to use a Pacific metaphor, if my own country, and likely yours as well, and our own generation, are not in a condition something like a tsunami. There's a period of calm right now. And I have a sense of foreboding that we may be soon at the mercy of a tsunami of demands, of cries for relief, of cries from those who are suffering, and saying, you have not done enough for us. And the judiciary, of course, can teach, and can teach in the first instance that a precondition to eliminating human suffering are honest, decent, non-corrupt governments. Well, having said that, I leave it to the rest of the panel members to tell me, to advise me what it is that as a judge I can do to meet these problems.
Thank you, Justice Kennedy. That is quite a challenge that you have posed to our panel. Will any member of the panel wish to take the challenge posed by Justice Kennedy?
Yes, Justice Kennedy, I agree with you that there is a teaching function of the judiciary. Every time the courts, particularly the United States Supreme Court, issues a decision, this is not only a decision on settling a controversy involving the parties, but the U.S. Supreme Court lays down doctrines, rules, principles that will guide not only the lower courts, but also the other branches of government, as well as the business sector, the professionals, and the public in general. In our country, we inherited the same system from the United States, as New Zealand did from Great Britain. And our own court has a teaching function. Now, more than that, however, in the past, our court has been accused by many people, including and especially those in the business community, as intervening too much in the economic life of the country. And so we have developed a leaning or a series of decisions. I would say that our judiciary has taken a no interference stance in regard to economic issues. Most of the time, unless there is a clear violation of the Constitution and the law, or a clear abuse of discretion by the political branches of government, the Supreme Court and the other courts do not interfere in the economic developmental policies of the political branches of government. This differential stance can be contrasted with our more activist role in the protection of civil liberties. Laws, therefore, that tend to violate the civil liberties of our people are strictly scrutinized by the Supreme Court and the other courts in the Philippines. This strict scrutiny against government action is in turn liberal in favor of the people, particularly the poor, the weak, the disadvantaged. So we have two standards of judicial review. One is strict scrutiny in regard to liberty, and differential review in terms of policies that are economic or developmental in character. So we may contribute that as a second means. The first, as you mentioned, Justice Kennedy, is the teaching function. And second, I would like to contribute the two standards of review. One, strict scrutiny in matters involving liberty, and second, a differential review in terms of economic and developmental issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Chief Justice Panganiban has addressed one point in the comment by Justice Kennedy, and that is how courts respond to these challenges. The courts, traditionally the least dangerous branch, admired more for its passive virtues, and now being called upon to perform a proactive role in addressing the pressing problems of the day. Mr. Solicitor General, and maybe hear from Justice Dury after the Solicitor General.
Justice Wallace, I cannot agree with you more that what the prerequisites for liberty and prosperity will be to have an honest and upright government. In fact, following my theme of having enlightened and responsible government, it will have to strive to ensure that the political and judicial administration is upright, honest, and also corruption-free at all echelons. And such a government will put in place an efficient and competent public service. And I think we have got the legacy from the British. The British has a very good public service, otherwise it wouldn't have been able to run its very vast empire many, many years ago. Now, a responsible and enlightened government always, as I believe, must act in the public interest, in the interest of the country and its people, and not for selfish, personal, political gain. And the larger societal interest must always take precedence. And the larger societal interest, in my view, must be paramount. I mean, if aid is given to countries, enlightened government will spend the aid wisely and not build structures or monuments to enhance their own personal image. And it will spend aid wisely to ensure that the social and economic infrastructure, roads, communication, electricity, gas, sanitation, housing, and all available in place to ensure that businesses will be attracted to invest in the country. And the other point would be for education, schools, teachers, to equip the people with the employable skills to lift themselves out of poverty. And enlightened governments will always try to create opportunities for business to thrive and to pursue market-friendly policies and be responsive to business needs and the business community. Thank you.
Thank you. Justice Dury.
Well, how do the courts in New Zealand respond to these rather large international demands and pressures upon the various peoples of the world? I think our response has been to ensure that we can lead by example in making sure that all that we do is done according to principle and not expedience. The second matter is that we have also, to the extent practicable, be consistent with with findings in other jurisdictions. So I want to correct the impression given earlier that everything in New Zealand came from England. That is not correct, and right from the very beginning, we borrowed a great deal from the United States. I should have mentioned the particular circumstance in New Zealand is that there was an indigenous people here, and a treaty was entered into with those people that set certain standards. Those standards roughly corresponded to the decisions of Chief Justice Marshall of the United States in the 1830s. And that too forms an important part of our Constitution, and the Bill of Rights in New Zealand incorporates the Treaty of Waitangi into it. So we do see the need to look for the development of an international common law and in ensuring that we are consistent throughout the world, if that is possible.
Thank you, Justice Dury. May I turn to Judge Wallace? Justice Kennedy mentioned the trend toward globalization and the increasing tendency of national jurisdictions to be subject to some sort, some form, some degree of international regulation, of international influence. And Judge Wallace, you have been actively involved in global initiatives for judicial reform in various parts of the world. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Let me start off with I don't think there's any doubt that corruption interferes with prosperity, and it certainly interferes with liberty. My view is that we ought to be able to identify what we as judges can do about it. Certainly we can't solve all the problems, nor should we. We have a limited responsibility, and under the system of government, we're not to impose ourselves outside of our judicial role. But let me ask the question. Where would you try a corrupt, powerful figure or a government leader? It would be in the courts. But if the court is corrupt, then it makes no benefit of trying the corrupted person in the court, because the same corruption will probably affect the judge. So what can we do as judges? We can focus upon the problems of having corruption within the judiciaries. Now, I don't know about your country, but we have corruption in the United States in the judiciary. In the city where Justice Kennedy and I are sitting right now, recently 3 very fine trial judges were convicted of corruption by a jury. I'm not sure there's any country in the world where there isn't some corruption, but I can't make that judgment. But I think my experience has been enough that it is a worldwide problem. And there are ways that we can focus upon how we can make as sure as we can that the judiciary is not corrupt. Now, in doing that, we must be ever vigilant that our judicial independence is not taken away in the fight against corruption. For example, if the executive has the responsibility to eradicate corruption within the judiciary, then you have the problem that an executive may use that power to challenge a judge whose opinions he does not appreciate. And so we must develop a type of system which investigates and tries the judges within the judiciary, or at least without a dominance of an executive, as we move forward to make sure we are not corrupt. Once we do that, we're on the way of accomplishing what we can do to overcome this very difficult problem that, in my judgment, is somewhat epidemic throughout the world. I had a consultancy in Tanzania on this issue, and the study group there concluded properly that we needed to bring in the media, we needed to bring in teachers, and that people from the very beginning must be taught about the importance of having a non-corrupt government and a non-corrupt judiciary. So the issues are very broad, but what we can do, we should do.
Thank you, Judge Wallace. You have identified for us the universality of certain problems like corruption, but at the same time, the earlier speakers have also pointed out the universality of certain values like human rights. And as we bring to a close our video conference, may I ask Chief Justice Panganiban to comment on some of the themes mentioned?
Well, thank you very much. Justice Kennedy and Judge Wallace, in the forum today, we have a mixture of sectors, let us say, while our panel now is essentially judicial because all of us are judges or have been judges, and the Solicitor General of Singapore, in a way, is also involved in the enforcement of laws within the court system. There are others in the forum today who belong to civil society, who belong to business, and who belong to the other branches of government. We have invited them because we wanted perspectives from others. But it remains true, according to Judge Wallace, that in the end, the role of the judiciary is very essential if we must uphold transparency, accountability, which are probably the antithesis of corruption, of shady dealings, and ways by which courts can contribute to the nurturance of prosperity. We will be discussing this over the next 2 days, today and tomorrow, and I am sure your contribution in this teleconferencing would be taken into account. So we'd like to thank you for this opportunity to be able to converse and to be able to get your views from 10,000 kilometers away. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Chief Justice. This kind of a forum would have been unimaginable 15 years ago. At that time, the task of judicial reform, the questions of judicial review, were considered purely national questions within the jurisdiction of every state, covered by their sovereignty. There was little comparing of notes across countries and certainly across oceans. And the mere fact that we are gathered this morning, especially with this video conference, shows how far we have moved forward in this task. Once again, I thank Justice Kennedy, Judge Wallace, Justice Dury, of course our Chief Justice, and the Solicitor General of Singapore for joining us in this forum. Thank you.
Thank you.